Welcome to the Priority Zero podcast. Stories of service.
Welcome to the Priority Zero podcast. My name's Aresti, and today with us we have Heston Russell. Now, Heston is a retired Special Forces Major with the 2nd Commando Regiment. He also did a stint as a politician and also heads up the Voice of a Veteran podcast and Veteran Support Force charity.
Yeah.
And you're also an author and a podcaster. We're not going to skip over the book with Cooper there, so don't worry, we're going to hit on that as well.
The Adventures of Copper. That's him.
Copper. Adventures of Copper.
Yeah.
All right. So let's have a little bit of a chat. You spent, I think it's about 16 years in the Australian Defence Force. Can we talk about what was your inspiration to go down that path? Because from what I understand, you're a 5th generation Army veteran.
Yeah, I didn't really know I was 5th generation until a few years ago. But my dad was in the military, my grandpa and nana on mum's side. Papa, as we call him, he served on the Hook in Korea as a section commander, then a platoon sergeant when his platoon sergeant was killed on the Hook. And then he was the regimental sergeant major, the RSM of 8 RAR when it was formed, and went to Malaya and Vietnam. And Nana, mum's mum, was actually one of the first female PTIs. And when her and Papa got married, when he got back from Korea, she had to leave the military because the rules back then were you couldn't be a married woman in the forces. But,
really?
Yeah, fascinating, isn't it? So I grew up moving around. I was born in Westmead in Sydney, and Dad was working at parachute training school and at Holsworthy, and then we moved up to Brizzy. And all the sort of people that I associated with during my childhood years were military families and were, the sons and daughters of military families. And particularly for me, once my parents divorced and all that, I went through the classic, child adjustment processes, and I became the fat kid in my high school years. I was unpopular, never had a girlfriend, and sort of really hated my high school years and looked for an escape. And the men that I saw in my life that were the most aspirational were those who were in the military or were the sons of those in the military who wanted to join the military, and I wanted to be like them. They were aspirational to me. They were mentors to me, and one of my best childhood mates actually joined ADFA and RMC and went to the Commandos. He's like 5 years older than me, and I sort of said that's exactly what I want to do, and literally made it happen. I think the story goes when Dad took me to my first defence recruiting, session, the information sessions in Brizzy. I was 14 years old, walked up to the front, and the sergeant, the warrant officer, says, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be a commando." And he giggled, because he's like, "There's a few steps you need to do before then." But that was me. I'm someone, once I sort of put my mind to it, I wanted to make it happen. It was an escape for me, but I wanted to go Commandos and I wanted to go Special Forces because I always wanted to test myself, because I never felt that I'd been pushed to my true limits, and I really felt like I had so much more to give.
What was your knowledge of the Commandos and their role back at that stage?
Yeah, well, like I said, that even when we moved up to Brizzy, every school holidays I would go down to a place called Peak Hill near Parks, and I would rouse about, ride horses, shoot, do all that sort of stuff with 3 sons of this guy who my dad served with in the military. And the middle son, Tristan, is the one who was 5 years older than me, and I watched him go through, 6 years older than me, and I watched him go through ADFA, go through RMC, and during his work placement at ADFA, he got placed with 4 RAR Commando, and straight away started showing me what they were doing and all this sort of stuff, and that's when I was like, yep, that's exactly what I want to do. And all throughout my career, even when I was in the military after getting out of RMC, in the infantry up in Townsville, Tristan at that time was at 4 RAR and just kept hearing what they were doing and talking to him and the operations that they were doing at that point in time. When he got to Afghanistan, I was like, yep, I enjoy big teams, I enjoy direct action, I enjoy the east coast of Australia instead of the west coast, SAS versus Commandos. And I just constantly had Tristo as a sort of pseudo mentor, where he was living the career that I wanted to, and gave me great advice on which heavy weapons course. I was a DFSW platoon commander at 2 RAR instead of being recon or something like that. Yeah, and I was just very fortunate to have that lead scout, as most of us do in most parts of our lives, and I followed that path.
Nice. And can we talk about when you got to Kapuka? What was your first experiences walking in for the first time?
Well, I was very fortunate being an officer that I never went to Kapuka.
Oh, really?
No. We I went straight to ADFA, the Defence Force Academy in Canberra, and I had just turned 17 in November, and January enlisted, and was straight down to Canberra. That was 2004 during all the bushfires. I remember flying into Canberra and there's just smoke and stuff everywhere. It was very eerie. They shaved our heads down to a number 3, the first time I've ever had that done to me. And it's the whole process of indoctrinating you, breaking your individual identity down to making you subordinate to the mission and the team, making everyone identical, regardless of your race, sex, gender, religion, whatever. You all wear the same clothes. You're all referred to by your last name. You're sort of dehumanized in order to be indoctrinated and initiated into the tribe. And straight away, you're all on a level playing field because you're being taught all brand new things that, sure, some people might have touched it in cadets, but for the first time in your life, you're learning something new, you're being assessed as new, and you're having all these other external pressures. And I loved it because I was so used to feeling inferior or being subordinate in the social standing where everyone else had different value that I felt they brought and I didn't bring. And straight away, you're on an equal starting line with everyone else. And I was a quick learner, a very personable person, and straight away started to excel for the first time in my life that I'd felt it properly socially based on, actions and attitudes, performance and competence and character. And I loved it. And I just sort of started thriving from day one.
Nice. What's a day in the life at ADFA like?
Oh, ADFA's unique. I'll probably say what's a week in the life of ADFA. So ADFA, you do a degree. So I studied a Bachelor of Arts. Majored in history and Indonesian, the language. And so you'll do your normal university curriculum. It might be 4 or 5 classes a day. But then every Tuesday and Thursday morning, you're up at 6 for, drill at 7 till 8, freezing cold in Canberra in whatever uniform, be that polyesters, you're just constantly ironing uniforms. That's all you do. Oh, and you also attend all of your university subjects in uniform, which was like usually polyester uniform. So you're just wearing uniforms left, right, and center. You live in a room there's 4 to a wing and there's 8 to a corridor. So that was your section lot. And it's 4 to a bathroom, 4 to a laundry. It's all communal living in a big 3-story sort of block. And you have to leave your room in inspection order with, there's no non-issued sheets and stuff. It's, especially in the first year, it's issued sheets with the Army or the Air Force or Navy sort of blanket on top, hospital corners. Everything has to be left in immaculate condition. Every week, I think it was on a Friday morning, you would have a white glove inspection. So most of us, you wouldn't sleep Thursday. You're polishing your brass, you're ironing the corners of your bed, you're scrubbing the toilets, the laundry, everything. And most of us would then make our bed, iron our bed, and sleep on the floor next to our bed, ready for the inspection the next day. And, mate, picture that for 3 years. And then when everyone else has university breaks, that's when you would go out bush and do your single service training. So ADFA is tri-service, Army, Air Force and Navy. So, 4 times a year when there'd be the university breaks, we'd reconstitute as the Army element by our year grades, first, second and third year. And then you would go bush and do, offensive operations, defensive operations, stability operations. You would go, to Canungra, you go to Singleton, you go to all these different, Wide Bay, all these different training areas. So it's a hectic schedule, yeah. Or you go out bush in Canberra, which is screaming hot in the summer with more flies than you can, whip away. And then in winter, it's freezing cold. I remember my first winter in Canberra, we're all eating the terrible ration packs and this gastro just went around. And I remember I'd eaten beef kai si ming that night. It's trauma. I memorize it. And I threw up in the middle of the night, just sick with gastro. And in the morning, this orange beef kai si ming was frozen to my webbing pouch, and I had to try and scrape it off with a rock.
Oh, no.
That's my first, as a 17-year-old, my first winter in Canberra, and that's when I seriously asked myself, what are you doing? Do you want to do this? My second year at ADFA, when I did my workplace, when they actually sent me up to Darwin, I did a week of bashing track with 5-7 RAR and then another week somewhere else. But I remember as soon as we got there, they made us do a BFA, run 2.4 Ks. And I just remember at the end coughing up water because it was like 95% humidity. And I feel like I was just running through sheets of water. It was disgraceful. You can keep that humidity.
Yeah, it's a little bit rough. It's a little bit rough. I won't lie. 3 years at ADFA. Where did you go? I went at RMC after that.
Yeah, so RMC is where you just go as an Army class. And so ADFA, you're doing academics, civilian academics. RMC, it's all military academics. And I loved RMC so much. It's all tactics, training, shoots, so tactical exercise with our troops, going out, planning, doing it. Yeah, it was brilliant. And even more regimented, more drill, more ceremony, more uniforms. But it felt so much more relevant to me because I never really enjoyed the academic side. I love learning tactics and strategy and military techniques and procedures, but I didn't really enjoy learning about, ancient history. And it's funny because as soon as I left RMC, I got posted to the 2nd Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment in Townsville, and 8 months later was deployed to East Timor. So my Indonesian that I learned from ADFA came in very handy.
Nice, that's really cool.
Yeah, it was.
It's a good language to learn, especially being so close to the proximity of Australia. And from what I understand, it's one of the easier languages to learn because there's not a lot of the genders don't change in the words, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, you're right. As a grade 3, 4, 5, I learned German, der, die, and das, and all that. And Indonesian's much easier. It's more like the sentence structure is sort of backwards. So you would say like, whose place is this? Like, place this who is, my terrible sort of breakdown there. But it was interesting. Yeah, you're right. 270 million people in Indonesia. And look, East Timor, the primary language is sort of Tetum. But particularly given that they had been Indonesian beforehand, when I turned up and sort of spoke Indonesian, I carried a lot more authority to it. But of course, you learn very formal language, and I spent a lot of time sitting with interpreters and kids and stuff over there learning all the colloquial and the slang. But it helped, communication 101. It helps bridge that gap and, really achieve a level where you can openly communicate with people and be understood.
Yeah, and I suppose it comes down to that hearts and minds as well, adopting their culture as well. And
no, you're not wrong. And I say this time and time again. I think going to East Timor as a 21-year-old brand new platoon commander set me up for the rest of my career. I once or twice had to shoulder my weapon. Once I flicked it from safety to fire. Never fired it. It was actually a pig, not a person. But just the hearts and minds and the complexity of the human terrain and the diplomacy and the politics and the communication and the escalation and de-escalation of force, it really was such a maturing and worldly sort of experience piece that, then when I went to Afghanistan 4 times, I was just so set up for all of the different elements because, look, high-end warfighting, go out of a target knowing that you're going to get into a gunfight and capture or kill someone is actually much easier from a thinking perspective. It's instincts and reactions and discriminating between targets, things like that. But, nowhere near the level of human terrain complexities that I experienced for the majority in East Timor.
Yeah. How did you find going into Timor-Leste for the first time? Had you travelled overseas before with your parents or anything when you were younger, or was this the first time you'd gone into a kind of, I guess you'd call it a third world country?
Yeah. I'd been to the US, but and I've been to New Zealand. I wouldn't dare call either of them third world countries. But no, it was different. You straight away you're out of your comfort zone. And, thankfully I'd had some experience in Darwin because the humidity in Timor was just disgusting. It was hot. But I think in particular for me, it was just quickly meeting a lot of the locals. Like we just went out on patrols straight away. As soon as they get you on the ground, they try and get you out on patrols, particularly with the other group that's about to leave. And just instead of, presenting this image of, aggression and what you think you're meant to, just smiling and, playing with the kids and things like that, and just really realizing that these are normal human beings and it's the minority that are causing an issue. Like there were these gangs and all sorts of violent stuff going on at the moment, but, just realizing that it's to treat people like individuals and not to generalize things and not to go in there with any form of superiority. You're not there to fix the country, you're there to help the country fix itself. It really was a really incredible mindset piece. And it was fascinating for me because it was my first deployment and I was around, there were a few other pretty toxic lieutenants and officers within the cohort who knew boats and had been to Timor back when it was, peacemaking, not peacekeeping, and were just full of their own ego. And luckily I've always sort of questioned why and never taken people's opinions just directly. I've always liked to figure it out myself. And I think being there on the ground, and that's all you can ever do, being on the ground and engaging with it directly and not just simply taking the word of mouth of others, and appreciating and remembering the humanity in people and in yourself. I think that's why I had such a great time. Like every time I went out, every Thursday, me and my signaller would go down to the local school and teach English. It really felt like a beautiful purpose and connecting with the people there. And to be honest, I've always spoken to my friends and family about going back and seeing what it's like these days, because we pretty much all had a pseudo adopted kid in whatever village we went to, like little Jeffrey, little Michael. You go bring them, colouring books. You'd go watch their fighting chickens, which was a cultural thing there. I'm not here condoning fighting chickens, but, it was just fascinating, and having the ability to help these people, just bringing them food, bringing them supplies, bringing joy to their life. It was really heartening. It was a really great development as a young 21-year-old, like I said.
Yeah, I suppose going there, with the army deploying there, you're there to do the job, of the army that's been asked of you, but to do these little extra things like doing the colouring in books, going to teach English, that's a personal touch that you can put on your service as well.
Yeah. I think that's the best part, and that's what I've learned from a very early period of my career is there's, it's easy to sit back and just be told what to do, or you can go out there and, make sure you do what you're required to. But I mean, step one of the military appreciation process is your mission analysis. What are the specified, implied, and essential tasks, and what are the opportunities, not just the risks? And you're right. The more that people, and this is the conversation I love to have about leadership. So many people talk about, you're there to be the leader, not be their friend. The difference between likability and leadership. You know what? The best form of leadership is where people want to do things for you, not only because they respect you, but because they like you. And that's because you are a good person and you're not doing things to manipulate, but you're doing things to motivate. And the ultimate form of motivation is inspiration, and the true form of inspiration comes from leadership. And it really is a difficult, and to be honest, it takes more of your personal energy to be good at your job and a good person. I think we can all know, military aside, whoever's watching this in their own workplaces, there are those people who are excellent at their job, but they are assholes. And then there are people who are terrible at their job, but they're good people. And like when we used to run the Commando selection course, we would select people from the course 4 to 6 weeks just based on the Commando values, just based on the Commando attributes. Because we know you select the right person. The rest is training. And we have the best training. We have the best equipment. We have all these resources. The most toxic people for any culture in any organization or group are those who are excellent at their job but absolute arseholes, because they will just continually be reinforced through success. But it's the way in which you treat people where the fibers of sort of culture combine, and those who are terrible at their job but are good people probably need more training or need a different job.
Very, very true. How long did you spend in Timor-Leste?
8 months. It was meant to be shorter. We were over there. I was actually the QRF, the Quick Reaction Force platoon commander, when Ronaldo tried to assassinate the Prime Minister and President. Yeah, there was this whole thing leading towards the end of 2007, where he and his crew tried to do a simultaneous hit on the Timor-Leste Prime Minister and President. And I think both ended up getting wounded, or one of them ended up getting wounded. Ronaldo ended up getting killed. And next thing, we spent the next 2 weeks. I did my first ever Hilo assault force there, going to capture some of these guys, and a crew from 2 Commando came over after we bailed up a bunch of guys in Mount Kaikasa, not Mount Kaikasa, near it there anyway. And that's probably where I got my first frustrating interface with the Australian strategic planning from Canberra, because they pushed a warship up off the coast of Timor to provide presence. And next thing, 3-hour hour was meant to rotate in, we were meant to rotate out. And instead they wanted both battle groups to stay there to maintain a maximum presence. And all that they did was push 2 battle groups into a footprint that was designed to support 1 battle group. So next thing, we had to try and find, abandoned houses out in Lakeisha that we were going to put a company to sit there for a month until Australia said we'd been there for long enough and then return home. Like, it was ridiculous. There wasn't a job for us to do, but Australia didn't want to be seen to withdrawing any troops during this volatile period. So we ended up being there for 8 months instead of for the 6 months that we were meant to be.
So 8 months Timor-Leste. After you come back to Australia, what happened from there?
Just back into training. I remained as platoon commander of Fire Platoon, Bravo Company 2 Commando, and we just did a bunch of training, did some tele trips, did some lovely, good stuff. And then I did my DFSW, Direct Fire Support Weapons course, and the oncoming CO gave me the DFSW platoon for 2019, but it was changing to anti-armor platoon. So we used to have just a 7.62, Mag 58s on tripods, and instead my job was to bring in the 50 cals on tripods and then really beef up our competency with the Javelin missile system. That was fantastic. We had missile simulators. Everyone else at that time, 1RR deployed over to Afghanistan. The rest of 2RR in 2009 redeployed to East Timor, or Timor-Leste, sorry. And it was just support company 2RR who was left back at 3 Brigade in Townsville. And my platoon sergeant and I learned how to get online and draw all the training ammunition from all these other units that were overseas, and went to the range and fired, 50,000 rounds of armor-piercing incendiary 50 cal trace, fired 3 Javelin missiles, and just, did training operations with helicopters, and got everyone qualified on ATVs. It was brilliant. 2019 was so much fun, and concurrently towards the end of that year, I started training myself up for Commando selection that I applied for to do in February 2010.
Nice. Talk to me about when you made that decision. Obviously, you had a fair few years of experience under your belt. You've had at least one deployment to Timor-Leste. What was your regiment coming up to that to be able to train for Commando selection?
Well, it's fascinating from a mindset perspective if I take a step back. Remember I told you at 14 or so I went to the defence recruiting and said I want to be a commando. And all throughout my ADFA and RMC time, I knew I needed to compete in order to be awarded the infantry corps, which was my first preference. And then I wanted to go to a unit, being a light infantry unit, that would help teach me the fundamentals that I knew would set me up for commandos. So everything was always a means to an end. ADFA and RMC was a means to becoming infantry, to becoming the unit I needed, to then becoming commando. Then when I got up to Townsville and I became a platoon commander of 5 Platoon Bravo Company, all of a sudden I realised how much I enjoyed my team, how much I loved being a platoon commander, because I loved the guys. I loved being responsible for them. I loved being able to protect them from people trying to reach down. I loved being able to work with them to achieve the most effective and efficient ways of training, and to send them home and not have them stuffing around, wasting their time, wasting their energy. And there really became a point where I was in love with my platoon, and then had to move on to anti-armored and built the same tribe as well. And it was so much fun. And I actually applied to do commando selection in 2009. I wanted to do it as a third-year lieutenant, but the new commanding officer came in and said no, even though I was then made the senior subaltern, the senior lieutenant of the unit. I was the highest performing lieutenant. He's like, no, I want to give you anti-armor platoon because I need you to bring in this capability to the unit. And it was a blessing in disguise, because as I spoke with my mate Tristo down at 4 RAR Commando at this time, getting this competency on the 50 cal and getting it to a mastery level, and the Javelin missiles were exactly the weapon systems they were using overseas in Afghanistan in their commando missions. So it really was a massive blessing in disguise, even though as I saw it as a sort of kick in the nuts. And then 2009, I really got to do some very hard training with my soldiers, and a few of my soldiers also wanted to do commando selection. So we sort of just started to form a little group, and throughout the year just started really pushing ourselves more and more and more. But when it came the actual lead up to commando selection in February, there was a commando training program, a 12-week training program that was a physical training program that I just followed to the absolute letter, as my mate Tristo told me to do. And then I also went and did a concurrent 12-week yoga course, because back then, stretch and recovery wasn't exactly the biggest thing, but I'd been recommended to do it. And look, it safeguarded my body amazingly. It was brilliant. And then I did a lot of quick decision exercises. There used to be like this magazine we get from the US. My dad, who was in the military for 30 years or whatever, would run me through some tactical training exercises, and I was always really good at tactics, and I just learned all I could about, memorized tabulated data on helicopters, weapon systems, all these things that I had the brain to be able to recall this information if and when I needed it. And I probably put in more training and preparation that was needed, but it was particularly that Christmas, New Year's 2009 leading into 2010 where I moved myself out of Townsville. I managed to get a posting direct to 2 Commando as a non-qual, which was their way of trying to sort of scout people. And I spent that Christmas, New Year's at my mum's place in Brizzy, doing all the fitness stuff. And I went to the tip and I got a truck tire, and across from my mum was the Ferny Grove Primary School, and I'd just be flipping. Mum said she would stand up on the balcony to see me flipping a tire from one end of the oval to the next. I would wake up, at 3 a.m., put my webbing and uniform on, and we lived in a place called, it was the Ferny Hills, Ferny Grove, and it was just hills all along Patrick's Road. And, at 3 or 4 in the morning, while it was still dark so it didn't scare people, I was doing my hill sprints, I was doing my long distance running, carrying, a metal bar, or then I would drive my car onto Enoggera Barracks, park up at the back near the gym and grab my webbing and pack out and go walk up the back of the hills, or go walk laps of the ring roads again under the cover of darkness in the morning. filling with my pockets with all my pouches with apples and oranges, and never allowed to play any music. You know, my mates told me don't train with any form of music or earplugs because you can't do that on the course. So I just trained the way I knew I was going to have to on the selection course and push myself. I look back on that time, mate, and I wish I was still that motivated. Like I was getting up to get me out before the sun rises these days. Like something's gone very wrong, but I was up and I was enthusiastic and I was carrying, you know, I put like 40, 50, 60 kilos in my pack, and, you know, I was then doing webbing runs up and down hills that these days I prefer to catch an Uber. Like, it's just fascinating that mindset I had, but I was just so aligned in head, body and heart to that purpose that was passing selection and becoming a commando.
Yeah, and I think that's the mindset that you have to have. It's kind of all or nothing.
It is. A lot of people would say to me, what's your plan B? I'm like, I don't have a plan B. Like, I'm not allowing myself to have a plan B. Like, I know I can do this. I mean, I love to do some coaching with some high performance people these days. And it's like, have you put in the work? You know, have you the skills? Have you put in the skills? You know, have you studied yourself? Have you studied your opponent? Have you done what you need to have strength, and have you slept? You know, have you put in the work? You know, are you aligned in your head, body and heart? Then become the champion or become what you want to be. And that's it. Like, I'm not allowing any form of mindset that's like, no, well, if I don't do this, because you know what? This is what I got to see once I passed selection and started running selection. If you have any seed of doubt in your head, then once you are removed from others and put inside your head, you'll find that seed and it'll sprout into a tree, and it'll be the branch that you climb out on to say, I don't want to do this anymore.
When you got posted as a non-qual into second commando,
yeah,
did you make it known that you do want to get beret qualified, that you are training for it, or did you kind of keep that to yourself for the moment?
Oh, no. So this is another interesting story of, you know, sliding doors. So 2009, I went down to do my promotion course at Canungra, and the career advisor contacted me, and SASR had actually opened up 2 or 3 non-qual positions, and they wanted to offer me like the first non-qual position. And this is them being smart. They, you know, as I learned, you know, they keep an eye out of who's out. They're talent scout essentially, and they wanted me to join SAS. And all of a sudden, and there wasn't that same offer on the table for 2 Commando. You know, at the end of 2009, 2 Commando became, 4RAR became 2 Commando. So there was all these changes going on. And I was actually down there at the captain's course, and my former CEO, my former commanding officer of RMC, a guy named Dan Fortune, who was an SAS qualified officer.
I know Dan Fortune. I was at a course with him at the Resilience Shield in December. There
you go, right. Dangerous Dan was there. And so we had an SAS CO and an SAS adjutant when we were at RMC. It was fascinating. And he came and gave a presentation of his time when he was CEO of the Special Operations Task Group, and they did this big mission. And I just caught him up in the mess. I was like, hey, sir, I just love a bit of your advice. I've been offered this, but I know he knew from my time at RMC I'd always wanted to go commandos. And he sort of said, cool, so like, why do you want to go commandos? And I said, because of the job. This is the job that I want to do. He's like, great, well then join the job, don't join the beret. And I said no to SAS, and then I was told I was going to get a training posting to a 1 commando reservist unit thing. And I was just like, oh God. And then just before the end of the year, all of a sudden, 2 Commando, a 4-hour became 2 Commando, and they opened up this non-qual position, and I got it. And I marched into 2 Commando January 2010, me and 2 other guys. We had a very quick meeting with the then commanding officer, who's now the current Special Operations Commander, Paul Kenny, and he said, so if you don't pass selection, then we'll post you out. and then, as it would be, the adjutant was my mate Tristan that I'd grown up with. And he ran a great sort of induction course for us that really exposed us to a lot more of the assets and capabilities and tabulated data, and showed us a lot of the training facilities, and really gave us a great sort of initial induction. And we were allowed to then finish off the rest of our training and get into it. And it was made emphatically clear that there was a higher expectation on our performance on the course, not to simply pass, but to excel. So again, mindset, layer upon layer. I had a beautiful slipstream into then having to put my personal skills and experience to the test. But, you know, head and heart, alignment, body had done the work, and then it was up to me on that selection course.
Nice. Let's go to the selection course now. Did you find when you were on your selection course, because obviously you had known Tristan, and you're also an officer. I know there's a little bit more pressure on the officers rather than the enlisted. Did you find in yourself they expected a lot more from you?
Mate, let me tell you. So back in my day when we did selection, it started with an officer pre-week. So we had 30 officers turn up, and look, I was a first-year captain, and there were a couple of other first-year captains. Everyone else was third, fourth, fifth-year captain, first, second-year major. I was the youngest on the course. I'm like, shit, here we go. Yep. Nearly everyone else had been to Afghanistan or Iraq before, and I really very quickly put everyone else on a pedestal. Every morning we got smashed with PT, like smashed. And the entire cadre course is there assessing 30 officers. So there'd be like sometimes 2 staff to every 1 officer. And we all had our candidate numbers. I was candidate 6. And we just got smashed. But very quickly, I realized like I was fitter than most. There were a couple of other guys I knew on the course who were just runners. You know how some people are just runners? But like my all-round fitness, like, you know, I could beat everyone in nearly everything else. I was a great swimmer. I was great at, you know, throwing myself to the ground and getting up. I was at least in the top, you know, 5 of nearly every single thing that we did. And I had great endurance to be able to keep going. And at the same time, I really enjoyed it. Like I was doing what I wanted to do. And I would constantly get in trouble from the staff on that first week for smiling. They're like, why the fuck are you smiling, number 6? And I just could not. You can tell I can't have a poker face. I enjoyed it so much. But so much so that I remember like the second last day of that officer pre-week, they just zeroed in on me. It was this disgusting PT session where we had to crawl through mud, flip tires, jump up over the obstacle course, do all these sort of things. And I just had every staff member just destroying me. And it was really humbling. Like, I just thought, because I was in my own head, I'm like, they fucking hate me. Like, I've done something, they just absolutely hate me. And it was one of my mates on that course, one of the only 2 other officers, 4 of us officers ended up passing selection, 3 to be commanders and 1 to be a JTAC, who ended up being my JTAC. And one of those officers, his name was Rafe. He was actually the second adjutant we had at Commando. You know, he was meant to be a major. And he just came up to me and was like, mate, they're smashing you because you're performing so well. Just remember that and don't take it to heart. So it was cool. You didn't really have a lot of time to engage with each other, but there were those genuine people who were situationally aware enough to really support each other. And it's actually that core group of people who supported each other that we all ended up sort of passing it in the end.
Yeah, that's a really cool perspective. Even like down to, you know, I'm thinking for me, never been in the military or anything, you know, sports growing up playing soccer, you know, if you're versing a team with your mates in it, you'd always try to hit them a little bit harder, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's always that little bit more rivalry in it. So no, that's really cool.
It was great. I was a puppy. Like I was just like, I'd never been used to people like attacking me like that, because throughout my military career, I'd actually been, you know, so great, and it put me back in that sort of quick high school mentality. Like, why do people not like me? And as opposed to being able to step back objectively and say, hey, you know, it's a game. They're smashing you for it's a game. I used to always take people on face value. I would never, you know, think that there would be politics or anything else untoward. So yeah, it was great. It's great to just continuously learn as you do things anyway.
Nice. And how long was the selection course?
So my selection course was 6 weeks. It was one of the last 6-week selection course. And look, the time, now it's 4, like when I finished my career, we developed it to a 4-week course. 6 weeks is a long time, you know, like that's when injuries just start to come. Like, it's a long time to go. I started my selection course around 91 kilos. I finished in the 70s. Like, I could hold my toothbrush between my abs. Like, it was how long the course was. That was the hardest thing. Like, could you imagine taking 6 weeks out of your life? Like, even catching up, I don't know if it was when Michael Jackson died, but something happened during that course. And when we finally got our phones back at the end of 6 weeks, we're just like, you know, what's happened? You know, the world's fallen apart. Yeah, it was really interesting.
I'm going to divert a little bit from your kind of life at the moment.
Yeah.
Just while we're on this subject, and we don't have to talk about it if you don't feel comfortable. This year is the first year that Commandos and SAS are running a joint selection. What's your thoughts?
It doesn't make sense to me because, again, the Commando selection course was designed in accordance with the Commando values, the Commando attributes. So every single activity we ever made someone do, whether it's sorting white rice from brown rice, carrying ridiculous amounts of equipment to form, a retrans station or whatever the hell, each activity had to be justified against, we're assessing their determination, we're assessing their communication, we're assessing this. And in particular, teamwork was a big commando attribute that was on the commando course and not so much on the SAS course, because we were selecting people to form commando teams. A 6-person commando team is the basic capability block of all of our capability. SAS definitely had some more attributes leaning towards individuals, because there are the requirements to do, clandestine, out of uniform, individual or teams or pairs sort of stuff, where some of those character traits can actually be cannot sort of gel as well with the emphasis to put the team before self, if that makes sense. So yep. I'm intrigued to understand how we're now developing a selection course to assess people against a different set of values through the same methods, if that makes sense. So how are they breaking down the different activities, unless they are breaking down specific activities to see who shines more as an individual or who shines better as a team? I'm really fascinated to see how they do that, because as we've said beforehand, mindset is also a massive part of this. Now, I'm hoping that people are doing the selection course and saying, yes, I want to go to 2 Commando, yes, I want to go to SAS, because you need to have that mindset alignment. I would hate to do the course and go all of a sudden, oh, no, you want to go to Commandos, but we're going to Perth, because there's a lot more than simply joining a unit. There's living on one side of Australia and the next.
And the job roles are different between Commandos and SAS as well, vastly different.
Massive. And that's it. And I don't know enough. I've been out of the system from what I've been told from my friends in the system. No, you do still apply for this unit and go for that unit. It's not like you all do the course and then all of a sudden they'll pick and choose where you go. But hey, who knows? Let's see what happens.
Yeah, very interesting. All right. Yeah. So talk to me about, once you finished selection, you got to 2 Commando, No.
So once you finish selection, so selection started in February, went for 6 weeks, and then the whole rest of that year, you're actually posted to the Special Forces Training Center, which is now called the Special Operations School of Excellence, or I don't know what it's called these days.
And it's for your REO cycles?
Yeah, and you do the reinforcement cycle. So you do back-to-back courses, heavy weapons, roping, vehicles, parachuting, explosive method of entry, amphibious operations course, advanced close quarter battle, commando urban operations, just back-to-back courses all year, and it is grueling. And again, a few people we had failed off that, and they usually come back the next year and go again. But so yeah, you pick the right person through the commando selection course, and then you train them to become a base level commando. And at the end of all of that, if you pass it all to the required standard, then you get your commando beret, and then you get posted into the unit.
Gotcha. Was there a specific course, or was there a time in a particular course that you did that you kind of took a second to go, holy shit, I love this?
Well, there was a many holy shits. The first time they made me jump out of a perfectly good helicopter with a static line and a parachute, not the biggest fan of heights and jumping out of planes, which is fascinating because my dad was a parachute jump instructor. He was a Halo, Hey-Ho, free fall, MFF. We would go as kids and watch him jump with the red berets, and he'd be the one with the flag jumping into a football stadium type stuff. Not for me, not in my DNA. Thanks so much. Then there was the amphibious operations course, which of course is conducted in winter in Sydney, in the Sydney Harbour, and just driving around the Sydney Harbour at night of a flotilla of 6 to 8 little black Zodiacs coming up alongside party boats, coming up alongside apartments on the water where people are getting up to adult activities on the balcony. Like, it was just like going under the Sydney Harbour Bridge at the black of night in little black Zodiacs. Just, it was very cool until they make you get out and do swimmer scout drills, and the water is freezing cold, and you're not allowed to wear a wetsuit for the first week, and you're not allowed to wear a dry suit until the 4th week. And it was great. Resilience training.
Definitely resilience training. Jesus.
Knowing, especially when we all now know how many sharks and crap are in that harbour. It was it was face your fears sort of stuff, dropping you out in the ocean and making you swim back.
Because we had that gentleman, the Navy clearance diver that got by the shark there, lost an arm and a leg. Is that right?
Yeah, sure did. Yeah. He now actually runs Shark Tank over in the US.
Really?
Shark Week. Yeah,
Well, there you go.
He's a good dude. I know him and his brother.
Can you tell me about the feeling when, once you finished all your reinforcement cycles, getting that beret for the first time? I'm assuming there was a ceremony that went with it.
Yeah, there was. And this is, look, I could break down the whole Australian psychology as far as men and initiation goes. You know, so many men don't get to go through that formalized initiation into a tribe where they put away entitlement and take on responsibility. And I was so fortunate in a short period to do that when I first joined the military, when I joined the infantry, when I joined the commandos in particular. There are these lines in the sand where you are given a responsibility. I remember when I got given the commando beret, we had this statement that said, this comes with a daily renewable contract. You know, it comes down to your actions and your attitudes each day. Too many people in the past have got things like their commando or SAS beret, and all of a sudden they rest on that as their laurels. Whereas for me, every time I wore that beret, be it in the unit or particularly outside representing the unit, I always sort of carried that weight of responsibility, knowing that people are looking at me and people want me to stuff up. People want me to seem arrogant. People want me to see that I'm superior to others. And I really, getting that commando beret was such a massive element of self-actualization for me, self-esteem in particular, and really just, and I was impressed with myself because it really helped me to take on board as a responsibility piece, because particularly given my psychological profile coming from being the rejected, fat, unpopular kid, it could have been so easy to flick that switch and just turn into the arrogant fuckwit, like I've finally made it, I'm better than all of you. But I was fortunate enough to be able to see enough of those already around and really be like, I hate bullies because I've been bullied my whole life and I want to be nothing like that.
Yeah, that's really good, because that's a conscious choice from you as well. You know what I mean? That's taking what you've seen around you and going, I'm going to be better than that, and representing the beret to what you think the beret should represent.
Yeah, I don't think it's not about being better. I think one of my favorite quotes is, some of the best lessons we learn in life are actually what not to do. Too often we like, what should I do? Have a look around, have a look at how others treat others, have a look at how others have treated you, and take that on board as a promise of what you will not do. Like, learn from their mistakes. And that's exactly what I think I'm a very quick learner, and I'm very good at learning what to do, but also absolutely what not to do.
Once you got that beret, did you get any time off, or was it straight into the unit?
So I got my beret, I think October, November, and then the company sergeant major, the wing sergeant major, a guy called Griffo, who ran our whole selection course, he was actually then moving over and becoming the CSM of Alpha Company, the Vikings, who was taking over TAG, the Tactical Assault Group, domestic counterterrorism role, straight away. And he apparently handpicked me and one other to come on and be the brand new platoon commanders. So, which was cool. But again, it was actually disappointing for me because I wanted to go straight in one of the companies that was going to Afghanistan. By this time, you know, we were approaching 2010, 2011. I got in the military 2004. I haven't deployed to any combat operations. I've done my one Timor gig. Every single person in the commandos and three-quarters of the people I did selection with all had their Australian Active, Australian Active Service Medal, the AASM, all had their infantry combat badges, all had been to Afghanistan, Iraq. And I was telling Warriors about Timor, you know. I've literally kept putting people on pedestals because of their deployments and their medals. But Griffo is like 110 kilos, like 6'2". He teaches the close quarter fighting. We call him the baby rhino, but he's just the most physically impressive dude. He would just snap you in half, but just so emotionally intelligent as well. And he could pick up on this, and he pulled me aside and he's like, hey, sir, look, I know. And he called me sir. He didn't call me candidate. It was great. Like, Griffo just knew what he was doing. He's like, I know you've always wanted to go overseas, but just know that, like, spending a year on TAG where you'll be shooting at the range, you know, until your finger gets sore, where you'll be doing missions every week, where you'll be learning the helicopters, the roping, the explosives, and also your men, your team, and the tactics every single week with the biggest training resource of any unit in Australia will make you the best commander when we get to Afghanistan. And the company was then due to go to Afghanistan in 2012. And he's not wrong. Like, we went straight off Rio, straight into Mars Olympics, which is the handover takeover exercise from our company taking over TAG from the other company. And it's assessed by Special Operations Headquarters, Army Headquarters, the Defense Minister's Office. All these certifications have to be approved for us to become the short notice to move national ready domestic counter-terrorism unit. And then that whole next year, mate, was flying around Australia, working with other police tactical groups in each state, the senior police tactical group in each state, rolling in and rolling off C-17s with vehicles straight into missions, in the middle of Sydney in this, giant office space, or in Defence Plaza, fast roping onto the roof of Defence Plaza, the giant building in the middle of Sydney, and then abseiling down the outside of the building, realizing how slippery glass on the outside is and smashing your face against the glass all the way down, doing missions where you're boarding ferries in the Brisbane River. That year, mate, I got sent over to Virginia Beach in the US with the Naval Special Warfare Group, as we call them diplomatically, 2 weeks after they just killed Osama bin Laden. And they hired out like an entire P&O cruise ship, filled it with role players, and we spent 2 weeks flying on, flying off with boats alongside as if terrorists had taken a giant cruise ship hostage and had to clear it with all different sorts of scenarios with the dudes who 2 weeks before had just killed Osama bin Laden. And we didn't know that. Like, I got selected to go I was the only commando. There was one other SAS goes. We got selected to go on this thing at this, halfway through the year or at the start of the year. And then 2 weeks beforehand it happened. And you can imagine all the people who tried to kick me off to get themselves off it before that.
Yeah, far out. That would have been a great experience. And we don't get that. I don't think we get that level of stuff here.
No, look, mate, we were working with the FBI HRT, hostage rescue team. I was over there with German KSK guys. Like, it was impressive. And yeah, you just got to see how big picture the big boys and girls are over there, and just how well skilled. Mate, these FBI guys with their little mini bird helicopters, like we were underway in a moving cruise ship, just moving, and these guys just hovering and maintaining. It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. Like, people, one false move, 1 inch move, and that helicopter would have hit the ship, and a whole bunch of people would be dead, because you're in the middle of the ocean going 10, 20 knots. You can't just turn that thing around and go pick people up. It was really impressive to see the level of risk, but the level of skill that they backed themselves with. Yeah,
those pilots must have been pretty damn experienced to be able to keep up that level.
And nearly all of them were all ex-special forces guys who then transitioned into these 3-letter agencies in the US. So the interoperability and the cohesion and the relationships and the communication was it was really impressive. Everyone knew their jurisdictions, and that's what the US does so well. Like, the US has so many different special forces and special operations units, and they all have their clearly assigned roles. And this is where Australia failed, particularly in Afghanistan, where the commanders and SAS were arguably doing the same role that we could have done. That delineation, that clear delineation, and that reinforcement by the seniors above helps to maintain that professionalism and cohesion between and across all their units.
Can we talk about Afghanistan?
Sure.
So tell me about your tour in Afghanistan. How long did you spend there?
So I went there 4 times. My very first deployment was as the personal security officer for Prime Minister Julia Gillard in November 2011, just before my birthday, which was fascinating because I feel like I should have deployed Afghanistan many times before I was entrusted to be the personal security officer for Julia Gillard. But the powers to be put me in there because I could attend all the meetings. We went and visited President Karzai as just me and her, all these sorts of things. So yeah, it was really, really fascinating. And then my next deployment was the reconnaissance ahead of our deployment. We'd go over there and I'd embedded with the Delta Company, 2 commando guys, and conducted a handful of missions with them for me to get the most up-to-date sort of information of what's going on the ground. Went to Kandahar and visited all the different ISR, drones, gunship assets that we would use. Came back, then conducted our mission rehearsal exercise and then deployed. And then I deployed in July 2012 with November Platoon as a part of Special Operations Task Group 18. And we commenced operations outside the wire in August. And from August to December 2012, we conducted 67 missions, ranging from capture, kill insurgent leaders within Uruzgan and Kandahar, through to target and destroy drug labs working alongside the US DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration guys, in Helmand Province. So we would track down giant drug labs that were primarily processing poppies to turn it into morphine base to be sold to make heroin all around the world and to fund terrorism all around the world. That was literally the logistical supply chain for terrorism funds. And it was brilliant. 67 missions. We killed 117 insurgents, captured many more, destroyed hundreds of millions of dollars worth of drug and narcotics, and unfortunately lost one of my best soldiers, Corporal Scott Smith, when he was killed by an IED on the 21st of October 2012.
Yeah,
but as far as
we did have a brief chat when you were in Darwin about that, actually. That's where I first met you, keynote speaker up here for International Men's Day, I think in 2021.
Yeah, is it Men's? Oh, it was Men's Day or Mental Health? Yeah, one of those two.
International Men's Day, yeah.
Yeah, it was good. Look, and that time in Afghanistan is, I like to give keynotes these days where I run through, everyone is so fixated on identity, and identity, I've actually realized, comes down to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It doesn't come down to all the superficialities that we keep putting on society. And Maslow talks about all these different layers of security building up to your self-actualized in self. And that, me in Afghanistan was the most self-actualized combat version of me. You deploy into an environment where you don't have social media. There's a landline phone where you can call, your family might do that once a week. But you've been so trained, skilled, and prepared. Like, we've been together as a platoon for 18 months. Before you deploy, you write out your will, you write out your funeral plan, you write out who you want your beret, the flag, your medals to be given to at your funeral. We would all write that we don't want any politicians or dignitaries that we don't know sitting anywhere near the front rows. They can be standing up the back of our funerals, because sadly, by this time, we'd all attended at least a handful of funerals of people we'd known from Afghanistan. And I think of the killed in action in Afghanistan, 18 of them came from the commandos or our engineers attached to us. Out of the 41 that died, that unit carried the brunt because of the operations we did, particularly in Helmand province with the narcotics disruption. And, you wrote letters. I wrote letters to my family and to my friends, and you'd either send them to them or you'd keep them in your folder. And I gave them to them. And I really learned very quickly that too often there are so many conversations left unspoken. And I left for Afghanistan with this complete satisfaction and calm and acceptance that I was doing what I'd always want to do. I was finally going on a combat deployment with a team that I'd handpicked myself, that I would handpick myself if I had to be given the chance, but I didn't need to because we'd all been put together. And if I died doing what I absolutely love, and I just hope that I didn't die putting anyone else at risk. And I was even at a level of acceptance that if someone else was better than me and was able to kill me, then, good on them, because I knew I'd put in the work and I'd studied and was strong enough and would work on my sleep over there as it was. So, and then out on ground on missions, being shot at the first time, killing someone myself the first time, all these stigmas you think they're going to be like they are, they're nothing like they actually are. There was never any anger or malice in my heart on any of the missions that we had. There definitely did enter in some when we lost Scott, but luckily I was with my team and my platoon, and we were able to ground each other again. But I was there's people have done this study on the state of flow. I was in such a flow in combat. I am the best version of me when there are bullets and bombs flying and I need to track where everyone is and make decisions and keep my head and heart clear. And I was just excellent at knowing where all my dudes were, knowing, almost manifesting. I felt like sometimes I almost manifested when things would happen, or just have this intuition where you knew, push the Apaches on station because I feel like something's going to happen here. And that's because before we went on every mission, we spent days or weeks huddled as a team, wargaming, picking holes in it, developing contingency plans. The amount of expertise and energy that went into our training and planning, before we went on the ground. It might only end up being a 4-hour mission, but there's been 4 weeks worth of work that have gone into that mission on the ground. And it's just that level of professionalism and dedication and expertise. It was the most perfect time of my life. And even you get to see some of the helmet camp footage and stuff I have online. Even when I get shot at, I'm going, oh, shish kebab, because I never wanted to swear in front of my guys. It was so weird, but I thoroughly enjoyed being tested. I enjoyed sitting back and not having to say a single thing on my radio, because I watched my team commanders and my soldiers do what they do best. And I remember having so many, I won't say proud dad, I like to say proud uncle moments. I remember sitting back on a compound in Helmand and just watching my teams do these tactics where they just zoomed up on this compound that was trying to shoot at this other team. And I was there ready to deconflict fires or push an asset off, and just, I'm sitting back here eating popcorn, guys. You guys are crushing it. Literally, you don't need me. And that was That was beautiful. And I know even that, for me as a commander, that was actually the mindset I took into most of my job. Too many people in charge, too many officers like to feel they need to validate their position, need to inject themselves. Where for me and my guys, we always had, and this came from, my headquarters above me, and in particular Griffo, the ultimate compliment is training someone up to make yourself redundant, because it means you've done the right job. And we would always want to train people up in case someone gets injured, in case I can't go on a mission, whatever. And seeing the guys grow into their skills and expertise was some of the proudest moments I ever got to see. And combat's just so great for that. Combat, the thing I love about combat is I say that bullets and bombs don't discriminate. Out in combat, you can't hide behind a computer. You can't send an aggressive email. You are exposed and held accountable right there and then. And you can tell everyone you're the best shot, but it's all about how you actually shoot right there and then. And it was just so humbling and grounding, and created the most authentic and accountable environment I've ever lived in. And you're with people you've trained up for years in the most adverse environment where people are trying to kill you. And as we all know, like, the strongest bonds of friendship are formed under adversity. And we got to do that nearly every single day. We got to do that for 67 missions in a 5-month period. So you can imagine the culture we had as a tribe, as a team over there.
Looking back now, thinking back to those moments, does it feel like it was you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, this is the issue for most of us. We're just so good at compartmentalizing things, It feels like a different life to me. And particularly the last 3 years with what I've been through outside of the military, particularly with the ABC and all the rest, I have gone through a mental and emotional process where I got so fixated on surviving in the moment and what's going to happen tomorrow that I forgot my entire past. For 3 years, I was in, I call it this cortisol block, this mania, where I was fighting for my life, fighting for the reputation of my guys, and I completely forgot that I even went to Afghanistan. Apart from a statistic, I've been in Afghanistan 4 times. I forgot the feeling in combat. I forgot the flow state I was in. I forgot how much I loved my team and my tribe outside of how much I needed to defend them here and now. And it's actually been a lot of therapy, mate. It's been a good couple of psilocybin mushroom trips. It's been some incredible therapies that have helped me fully remember who I am, go back and decompartmentalize some of those boxes, and the depth and fullness I feel today has only come from drawing back and remembering all that I have done. Just simply enough to say that, I do have experience that I can bring forward, not, again, anything that's worth resting on my laurels.
When I first brought up that question to you, when you started to tell the story, looking back, your whole face expression changed. You started smiling, like the difference. When you're
the face that got me in trouble on selection, right?
It was really, really nice to see people look back on what they've done and be so proud of what they've done and proud of the team that they formed. It's really good seeing that in you. And
it's been really hard because when all this stuff happened with the ABC and everything concurrently in 2010, in 2021, Afghan fell. And you're left there going, like, was it worth it? And this is where the biggest failing of Australia as a nation is we didn't take the Australian public along what we're doing over there. Most of the public knows what our conventional forces were doing, building schools, all this building, infrastructure, all that. We were over there as a special operations task group to capture and kill bad people and to disrupt terrorist networks around the world. The Special Operations Task Group killed over 10,000 people during all of our time over there. And look, I'm the last person who will ever put my hand up to send any Australian sons and daughters over to any wars overseas after experiencing what I've experienced and realizing that war is only what happens when diplomacy fails, which is when politicians fail to do their job. And until politicians step up and send themselves or their sons and daughters to the front line, fuck sending any of our guys and girls. But what I did learn is just how much incredible experience at an individual level and as a team level we gained from being tested in a mission that we felt completely justified doing given the intelligence picture that we had direct from our government and other government and even the locals on the ground. Like, people forget, and people have never been told, that every single one of those 67 missions I talk about, we went out with an Afghan partner force. We went out with the Afghan Special Police, the Provincial Response Company. We went out with the Afghan NIU, the Afghan Narcotics Interdiction Unit. There was never a single mission where it was just a bunch of Aussies rolling on a target. We were there with our Afghans, and we had a partner force ratio toward the end of the deployment, which meant that there actually needed to be more Afghans with us on target than there were Aussies. And this is the whole thing when it comes to war crimes and all the rest. There was never a single complaint raised by any of our Afghan partner force of anything that we did. The police we went with on target under Afghan law were authorised to conduct public hangings of anyone that they thought that was engaged with insurgent or terrorist activities. And on a number of occasions, we had to stop them and say, no, bring them back to base. Because we're smart enough to know that someone is going to have a camera somewhere. And while you might be doing that correctly, us, under Western eyes and Western values, to be seen there to allow you to conduct a public execution is not on. At the same time, we're dealing with things like the culturally acceptable pedophilia that happened over there, and our need to maintain these relationships while appreciating these cultural nuances, but again, putting our foot down and saying we're not going to stand for any of that while you're working with us. These are really difficult and challenging conversations that could have directly impacted our combat capabilities, because any night operations had to be approved all the way up to the Afghan presidential office. And any time they could and did play power games with us, if they wanted extra money for their weapon systems, if they wanted extra food, if they wanted, to have this day off, they knew they could play hardball and stop our approvals up the top. They were controlled by this warlord, Matullah Khan. The Australians and Aussies paid them so much money. There's all this stuff behind the scenes. So when people like the ABC try and say the Aussies, when they're out on target, just indiscriminately kill people, they haven't, and even the whole Brereton report never once interviewed any of our Afghan partner force.
Yeah, that's pretty sad.
It's wild, isn't it? And instead, what happens, mate, just like any football team out there, imagine that massive pressure cooker that is the combat situation, living together with each other, being exposed every single day in your own competency. Some people were sadly found to not be as good as they thought they were. And they were provided with direct and clear communication by people including myself, my sergeants, my team commanders. And some people formed resentment on being exposed and being held accountable. And look, my team was great because we had those conversations and we had all this time beforehand to develop that culture. But have a look at some of the things that have happened over in the SAS. Have a look at some of the things that come out with the Ben Robert Smith case. You have people who have just hated him and not got along with him and had personal issues now coming out, being provided with immunity, being exploited by journalists to throw knives knowing that they don't need to be accountable. One of the people in his trial, mate, has said, Ben ordered me to kill this dude and I killed him. That dude is provided with immunity because it's a civil defamation court, not a criminal court, to say that he killed someone because what they want to get is the fact that he says Ben told him to do that. That's where we're at, and that's why my whole court case and everything that's going on with Ben Robert Smith is I'm just disgusted that if there are any accusation of allegations, they need to go through a criminal court where it's tested to a standard of evidence that is beyond reasonable doubt, because in civil defamation, it's on the balance of probabilities or a little bit more. Has to be tried by a jury of our peers and has to be tried in a court where if anyone giving evidence is held accountable to that evidence, including incriminating themselves.
Yeah, well,
and rant. Sorry.
Yep. No, 100%. We'll leave it at that.
Yep.
All right. So after the whole Afghanistan thing, I know there was an Iraq trip as well.
Yeah, fascinating for me because going back to my time at Turayar, when in 2009, Turayar, 1 hour deployed to Afghan, 2 hour deployed to East Timor, Timor-Leste, and then there was the opportunity to send one platoon on a SecDet, security detachments, to Iraq. And I had just been made the senior subaltern. I was the highest reporting lieutenant. And instead, they sent the guy who took over my platoon in Bravo Company. And I was devastated because that was kind of one of the last deployments to Iraq during that period. And I'd always want to go to Iraq just because of like the history, the culture, and, it's the center of the earth, back in the day, it's the center of the ancient world back in the day. And then when I was adjutant at 2 Commando in 2014, all of a sudden Daesh, ISIL popped up and started ravaging that country. And very, very quickly, the commandos were the first to send, under my former boss, Ian Langford, deployed the Special Operations Task Force, SOTF, I think it was 632, I can't remember what it was, to Iraq and took the fight to ISIS. And then, as fate would have it, I deployed to the US. I was sent on posting to the US the next year in 2015 and instead deployed to Afghanistan again. And then when I got back, there was the opportunity when I was on promotion in 2016-17 at the end of running selection in Rio to be sent over as the J5, the Special Operations Joint Planner, to the Special Operations Task Force, Operation Inherent Resolve, that was handling Iraq and also Syria. So I deployed to Baghdad for 4 months and was one of three Aussies embedded within this American Special Operations Joint SOGITF, Special Operations Joint Interagency Task Force. And it was cool, man. Like primarily operating with Americans, but also had some Canadians and some British there. And it was all, 22 SAS. It was all, what am I allowed to say? JSOC US guys. And it was big hands stuff. Like my job at that time, we were all sort of fixated in the current operations to help liberate Mosul. But my job, because we had the Peshmerga doing an amazing job, we had Iranian military forces as militia supporting. We had the Iraqis. We had all these other things going on. We had 25, I think, or 24 different special forces units from all different countries supporting, and they all had their own individual national remit of what they're allowed to do. And our job at the headquarters was to find roles for them all that matched all that. While at the same time, how are we going to reposture, push down to Syria? How are we going to make sure that there's not a civil war between the Iraqis and the Peshmerga once we liberate Mosul? How are we going to try and make sure that the Iraqis purchase all of their drones and military equipment through the West, through US, through Israel, instead of through Iran, who are trying to do all this stuff to set up lines of supply, which means you're dependent upon these countries? It was big hands, little map stuff. And I was going every day or every second day over to the US Embassy to conduct briefings. During that time, I think Donald Trump came in. We had to provide briefings for him and his team when they came to visit. Like it was interesting, big world stuff. And then I go back to my desk and I had messages from Canberra and from the Aussie commandos on the ground having issues with Canberra because they weren't allowed to be within, quote, one tactical bound of the combat, but still needed to be there to support the Iraqi counterterrorism unit, the CTU, who were the guys in all black crushing it. And so they're trying to get Bushmasters sent over to give them protection to be close enough. And then Canberra says, well, we don't want any Bushmasters to be seen by all the international media because, with the Australian camouflage, because I say they're Australian. So let's paint the Bushmasters black. And then I'm having to say, hello, everyone. Sorry to just butt in on this conversation, but a Bushmaster is a Bushmaster, whatever colour it is, and it's the only Australian vehicle.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I have someone in Canberra go, oh, shit, didn't think about that. I'm like, I'm preparing briefs for like these big hands and how the rest of the Middle East is going to fall into place after this, and you're arguing over the colour of a Bushmaster. And, mate, that was the beginning of the end because there was that. There was the Aussie commander I worked with over there who was adamant he was going to take over special operations and whip its culture back into place because the toxicity between commandos and SAS had boiled over. And I was in love, and I was in love with a man. And I'd only just, sort of accepted my sexuality. And when I deployed back to Australia, I was due to be promoted, and they wanted me to take over a company for 1 year, which was meant to usually be 2, before they sent me down to Canberra to do staff college to then go on promotion. And moving further and further away from being in direct command, being directly responsible for and to soldiers is what actually kept me my most accountable and best self. It wasn't for me. So I got back and I had like 140 days leave in my book plus 6 months long service. And when I got back from that deployment in early 2017, I moved to LA to live with my partner Blake for the rest of that year, and then ended up deciding we were going to bring a business called Barry's to Australia together, and I ended up putting in my discharge, and I discharged exactly 16 years and 1 day in January 2019.
How did it feel when you left? I know a lot of people leave these different first responder roles and they feel like, they've lost their tribe, that sort of thing. Was there a bit of a transition period there for you?
There was. And I mean, this is all the work through my charity. We campaigned for and won the Royal Commission. I do a lot of work alongside it, and sort of loss of purpose, loss of community, and loss of identity are the big factors that impact particularly transitioning veterans, but arguably everyone. And it's such an important framework that I really want to get out there more and more and more. I traded my identity and community and purpose. I just jumped from one to the next, as we do so well as commandos. It's being adaptable. As we do so well as military people, we adapt so well to our environments, our new mission. And I traded my identity being commando for being in a relationship with my partner Blake and being gay. I finally started living an openly gay life, just simply being comfortable in my own skin. I traded my military community for my gay community, which is a very powerful community that is formed from people rejecting themselves or having others reject them. It's a community that is formed through adversity, and particularly finding the right people in that community who are like-minded, who are high-performing, who really value, physical fitness and mental health and all these sorts of things. I really blended into a tribe where for once I didn't have to prove myself professionally, and I was accepted personally, and that was incredible. And I sat still on my hands for a bit, and then very quickly I found purpose. And Blake was a Barry's instructor, and they wanted to start expanding to the US, and they actually approached me. And next thing, we were opening Barry's in Australia and Singapore. And I made my job, my relationship, and my sexuality my identity. And that was the beginning of my spiral, because I didn't put the work in to appreciate who I was outside of those things. I replaced all of the elements that I'd lost with my intrinsic and extrinsically deeply motivating military career and service with suddenly working in this space where I was liked because of how I looked. I was achieving based on earning profit, whereas previously had been earning purpose. And I very quickly sort of adapted to seeing my achievements and success being the definition of who I was. And then as soon as I started to fail, as soon as I started to experience stress in my life, as soon as I started to appreciate that relationships aren't just the butterflies in the stomach you feel when you first meet the person. I'd never been in a public relationship beforehand. I never had conversations with my partner. We simply dwelled at home, and we were a social image and identity outside. And as soon as all those things started to fail, and then all of a sudden COVID hit literally 2 weeks after we broke up, my world came tumbling down. And it was a very humbling experience where I got put on that silent running period on the selection course for, a large period of time, sitting in my apartment with no mission and no team, and just being solely inside my own head. And that's, as the story goes, August sort of 2020 is when I had my first suicidal ideation and sort of realized I was in a bad way, and have spent all the time since then rebuilding a community and understanding who I am based on my values, my personal character, and those select few that I choose to be, the ones I'm the most vulnerable with, essentially, including my little puppy dog.
That's it. Quite a testament to your character, especially everything you've been with, and rebuilding yourself, and finding you try rebuilding yourself again, and always finding that purpose, and always staying true to who you are as well. I think is very important, and your own values.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And I think in particular, mate, the 3 years following the ABC, particularly the last year of the court case, where basically every part of my life was ripped apart, every part of my identity was ripped apart very publicly, really hurt, really took me to a very new, low, dark place. But it's been putting those pieces together. And I think finally what that whole court case helped me to realize is the whole thing about not worrying so much what others think of me. Again, I've always been used to being liked as well as leading, and just finally getting to a place of realizing you're never going to please everyone. You're going to send yourself crazy trying to. And at the end of the day, I've finally actually accepted who I am. And this is what I say to people as far as Maslow's level of self-actualization. Even so many of my guys, when they have subsequently found out that I am gay, like I never had it coming out. I just started saying yes when people asked me. The amount of my commando soldiers who said this to me, Hesto, we wish you felt comfortable enough to tell us, because knowing how we perform and how high performing you were, to still know that there was, to still know that you were holding yourself back like 1, 2, or 5%, trying to hide that little bit of your sexuality. That, like, imagine how amazing you could have been if you were able to put all of your energy into, being what you were. And I mean, it's just phases and stages and learning. And I say to people, I'm a better leader today just simply because I know who I am. I'm definitely going to be rusty on my skills and drills at the range and as far as tactics and that goes. But this is the true leadership comes from knowing who you are, also knowing what you need to keep yourself grounded, accountable, inspired, and your energy levels up, and then how you apply that to others for a authentic purpose. And this has been the biggest thing I try and talk to veterans about is when they transition is you're transitioning from a giant for-purpose organization. We would remove people from the commandos based on them failing the commando attributes, based on them having an integrity issue, regardless if they were the best shot in the unit, whereas out in the corporate world, it's KPIs first and then values second, whereas the military is values first, KPIs second, because we know we can always train and improve. and just that conflict that comes from trying to replace purpose and service with profit and life on the outside, and also coming from an organization where you're meant to compartmentalize your emotions, you're meant to push your emotions away and not show any emotion to a world that just runs on emotions, but also appreciating how powerful it can be to harness your emotions and be inspired by your emotions as well. These are these conversations I feel, particularly as men, we need to be better at. And I definitely know, like, we're getting so much better at. It just takes more time to push past the stigmas and shame and insecurities that so many people feel when having these warm and fuzzy conversations. But, mate, as you would know, like, I get on a high after having these conversations with someone like you, because you just get what's in your head and heart out, and it's not ricocheting inside your own head. And you remember more of yourself and remember how much of a human you actually can be.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I try to make this well known to everyone I speak to, especially the men. In order to be less vulnerable, you have to be vulnerable.
Well, I'd say in order to be less insecure, you have to be more vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's that whole, the last thing I put on top of it is this template of responsibility or entitlement. And particularly, mate, I've got to see it everywhere, wherever there's trauma. So particularly in the gay community, I just was down in Mardi Gras, down in Sydney for Mardi Gras, and I had to, throw fireballs at the Sydney Mardi Gras board who tried to, ban the police from marching over this off-duty police officer who killed his ex-lover. That was a gay man, and it was a crime. It was a domestic violence crime. It wasn't a police hate crime. So often when there is trauma, when there is the potential for people to connect on vulnerability and then turn that into just, amazing energy, if people are looking for entitlement, people want you to be a victim, people are looking for, well, this has happened to you, so we need to get back at them, as opposed to how can I be responsible with what has my vulnerability taught me? How can I help others through my learnings from that vulnerability? It's this entitlement versus responsibility. I'd call them two lenses, two glasses that people either, and you see it with officers, mate. When officers climb the ranks and no longer directly command soldiers and just command other officers, too easy for those responsibility lenses to turn into entitlement. And the definition of leadership is a service to others. It is being responsible for others and accepting risk on behalf of others and empowering others. It's when these leaders in any place all of a sudden think that leadership is about them being served, about what they're entitled to because of their rank, their position, their role. And just have a look at half of the officers giving, testimony and Senate estimates and the way that they respond and conduct themselves, and see the entitlement creeping into their answers and their attitude. That's that toxicity, that toxic leadership that then permeates down through an organization when you see the people at the top do it.
That can destroy an organization. All it takes is a few bad people at the top, and that'll just funnel straight down, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And this is where all I keep remembering, and in this day and age where we're so connected, it's so easy to focus on that. I love to call it the javelin top-down attack. Everyone keeps focusing up here, but all I've learned time and time again is that the power of any organization is in the people. And leadership absolutely comes from the top down, but the most powerful form of leadership comes from the bottom up. Individuals can lead in their own bubbles, and that permeates and touches all those adjacent and above them. And I just remember, deploying to Afghanistan, when I deployed with my platoon in 2012, I was still one of the youngest people. And I was so inspired and empowered by the incredible commanders and soldiers that I had underneath me in a chain of command, but right beside me as far as a team. And I was responsible for them. And part of that responsibility was to learn from them and make sure that I set the conditions so that all of our collective expertise would make us better on target and bring everyone else home. And that's where I really learned the art of being a good leader, is knowing how and when to be a great follower and to listen as much as you do in communicating your practice of leadership. And I think too many people, particularly in the hierarchy, and I see this, I digress, I get to see this firsthand in the US, where all the generals and commanders I worked with had been in combat, had been tested, knew exactly who they were at that fundamental levels. I see it back here in Australia, where you have people who have distinguished service crosses and never had to be in combat, never had to defend themselves, never had to protect someone, never had to fire their weapon in anger. And I see the difference because I feel at a deep down psychological level, they carry that insecurity with them, and it manifests in them exercising their authority with the heavy, authoritative, toxic, I am to be served, entitled leadership hand. And I reckon anyone from the military who's watching this podcast, or even in the civilian world who wants to sit back and watch people like General Campbell give his statements and Senate estimates, will see exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I can imagine you coming in, especially when you first got into commandos and coming in as a captain.
Brand new captain. Yeah.
Yep, brand new captain, having those people under you, especially those enlisted guys, those corporals, sergeants, that sort of stuff. Although you're above them, you need to play the hearts and minds game with them as much as you have to do with the enemy. Well, you've got to win their trust, you've got to win their respect, and you've got to learn off them.
Absolutely. And the key part is, it's not even hearts and minds, it's just competence. So it's competence and character. You can try and be their mates, and the guys will sniff you out, and they know you're only going to be there for a few years, and they've seen officers come and go. And particularly in the commandos, this is the brilliant part. So you go to the commando, there were people who'd been in the commandos for 10, 15, 20 years, at that soldier enlisted level, and never wanted to move on, and that was their prerogative. But within the platoon, if the guys called you sir, it meant they didn't respect you. If the guys called you boss, it meant they did. And as weird as that was, I had that azimuth check every single day. And, the platoon sergeant would never let the guys call me Heston or Hesto. I sort of apparently had two personalities, Heston and Hesto. And the platoon sergeant was like, nah, in closed doors, even he would call me boss, because it was just this way of maintaining this mutual respect. I'd call all my guys by their first names, not their last names. But yeah, the guys, because there's always someone watching and there's always some officer who'll get annoyed. Yeah, they'd call me boss. And I saw a few of my peers openly and happily being called sir by their soldiers, and you just knew, and you could see it in their face every time they heard it. That's what I love, mate. I love that team environment. I love that soldiers and NCOs who just know, they know culture, and yeah, they to think that you can come in and just, change the whole place is just so naive. And look, we're talking about the military. I'm really so disappointed. I feel like so many of these issues at the moment would be helped to be resolved by strong senior NCOs who are meant to be those RSMs, who are meant to be those senior soldiers alongside these generals who are making these statements. But unfortunately, we see it again in those senior NCO ranks where people make those positions based on political decisions or diplomatic differences. Real leadership is what's needed to cut through, and if it doesn't come from the officers, it needs to come from the NCOs.
Work its way up.
Yep, absolutely.
Can we touch a little bit on your advocacy for veterans and your voice of a veteran?
Yeah, for sure. Voice of a Veteran was born from my suicidal ideation moment. It was born from me sitting there writing out a letter to Jackie Lambie on all the failings that DVA had put me through, and how the system needed to change, and how my death was to be a lightning rod to cut through, because I had a social media following, I've been in the media, things like that. And my revelation was that, hey, why am I going to again outsource this to someone else to tell my story? It's time for me to start my own story. And it came from me talking with one of my commando mates, Scotty Evanett, in a moment of vulnerability where I'd otherwise been embarrassed to admit that I'd had a mental health issue. And straight away was met by him saying, Esther, I've never told anyone this, but I've felt and do feel exactly the same. And then he and I talking with more mates and setting ourselves the mission to speak with others just in case they were experiencing the same thing. And 9 out of 10 coming back and saying the exact same thing, and saying they'd never admitted to it beforehand, and saying things like, Hesto, for you to admit that, we see how happy, healthy, fit, all the things you are, social you are on social media. For you to admit that you've been to that low place has given me permission to be vulnerable as well. And again, in a responsible way, not in an I'm a victim, me too way. So we started up a podcast and started talking and having these exact conversations. And more and more people, civilians and military alike, started to connect with it. And then next thing, as fate would have it, the Brereton report came out. Angus Campbell stood up and said he wanted to remove the unit citation from 3,500 special forces personnel, everyone who deployed. And I got a call from the mother of one of the soldiers who was killed in action, asking me how to remove her son's unit citation from the frame without destroying the frame. And I lost it and called one of my friends who knows how to do things in the digital world. And next thing, we raised a petition to retain the unit citation. And at the end of 4 weeks, we had 90,000 signatures. Or at the end of 2 weeks, sorry, we had 90,000 signatures, and then managed to lobby the government. So then when Peter Dutton came through, got them to retain the unit citation. And during that advocacy, got introduced to all layers and levels of government in closed doors, and decided to start door knocking to win support for a royal commission, realising that's actually what's needed, the highest level of accountability, while the government was trying to push this national commissioner bill, which was just another mates rates play, in my opinion, and won that. And literally Dutton and ScoMo both announced both those two victories the week leading up to Anzac Day 2021, which is what they do. They save for the best PR time to do it. And then I formed the charity Veteran Support Force off the back of that, as we did our own individual consultation for the terms of reference. The government announced they wanted the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Minister to run it. And then straight away we had all these veterans and family members saying, great, it's done, we want no part of it. So we stepped up and out of our own funding, which was coming in from people just giving us money off the street, ran a consultation process that I think got over 800 submissions provided to the Attorney General's Department, and then helped to form the Royal Commission that's currently ongoing. And we've just done a bunch of things alongside that, including last year launched the Veteran Games, and we'll be continuing with the second Veteran Games this August on the Gold Coast.
Nice. That obviously took up quite a lot of your time and a lot of effort, and I got to achieve that purpose and service that was missing from my life. Unfortunately, it doesn't provide profit, but the satisfaction that comes from that purpose and service is, money will come one day. Yeah, I know a fair few people and friends and stuff that have served in the military, and a lot of the stuff that you've done advocating for veterans, has, directly helped them or make them feel good about their service and what they've done. So, on behalf of them and myself, I just want to say thank you for everything that you have done for veterans. You've dedicated a lot of your life, time, and even personal money into doing these stuff. Yeah. So on behalf of them, I just want to say it has not gone unnoticed, and thank you.
I appreciate that, mate. And look, so much of that came from the ABC attacking my guys, me, and what I put my family through, thinking I need to kill myself, and then again applying that mindset of, how can I do this better? What needs to be done? That problem-solving mindset. And then the day after the ABC attacked my platoon with that article on the anniversary of the death of Scott, 21st of October 2020, my grandfather, the one who served on the hook and in Vietnam, he called me and he just said this, mate, don't let them treat your soldiers the way they treated mine when we came back from Vietnam. And he died 2 months later. And that is the number one legacy, where you could imagine, particularly post-winning the ABC court case stuff, I just want to go back below the detection threshold, go back to living a life that is happy and healthy and focused on me and my family and all I put them through. But the fall of Afghanistan brought out all these Vietnam veterans who contacted me saying this is exactly what happened with the fall of Saigon, and my grandfather talking about how veterans were treated post-Vietnam reminds me, and so many Vietnam veterans tell me the same, that they're disgusted the way in which our Afghan veterans are being treated post-Afghan. And so many of them have said to me, if we had your platform or your skills and abilities that you have in the media these days, maybe it wouldn't have taken 50 years for the government to apologise for what they did to our guys. Let's see if, and they're the ones, mainly the Vietnam veterans, mate, so many are supporting me behind the scenes, being like, let's do all that we can here and now to, future guard the next generation, the next conflict, because it probably will happen, and we just can't keep repeating these same mistakes, because the politicians move on. It's the veterans that are left with the legacy, not those political masters who ordered us to go over there and have now moved on to their pensions and their cushy lives.
Absolutely. The last thing I kind of want to chat about is someone that's been there for you for quite some time, supported you, Copper.
I would love it at this point if he's waiting outside the door. Let me actually just check to see if he is.
Yeah, let's have a look. Oh, there he is.
He was actually just up on my bed next door. This is the little munch. I call him my walking antidepressant. I like that.
That's so cool. He's such a cool dog, and he's got his own book.
He does. He's got two, The Adventures of Copper. It's actually fascinating. My ex surprised me with Copper at a point where I was just made redundant from my job at Barry's in a very interesting way. And I was sort of lost in what I was doing. And next thing, he literally surprised me with this tiny little sausage dog. And I mean, my initial reaction was, oh no, because we were literally moving house the next day, and my pragmatic head was like, what have you done? But this is what I tell any young guys or girls, particularly leaving the military. I'm like, if you're alone, get a dog. Like the level of responsibility that comes with having to look after them, unlike a cat, like you need to actually look after them properly. They won't just, jump over the fence and go feed themselves. True to like what they teach us, like true unconditional love, true companionship, and how they're just so invested in our lives. It's incredible. Copper has helped me really love properly and appreciate real love, as weird as that sounds. He doesn't need a brand or an illustrious present. He just wants like a cuddle and a piece of chicken. Like that's, and in return, the loyalty and the determination and the true companionship, when I was alone, all the times that I've been alone, he's always been there. And when I was sitting on my couch writing this letter to Jackie Lambie, the only reason I snapped out of it was because he woke up and he walked up his little ramp onto the couch and he put his head on my lap and looked up at me because it was time to feed him. And it's that connection and that responsibility that cut through and brought me out of the mania. I was so committed. I was like, as if I'm going to win lotto. This is exactly 100% what I need to do. It's just like watching people pull themselves off the selection course. This is the exact decision I've made. The entire world says that this is what has to happen. And having him around has just been, an absolute lifesaver. And like I literally do say, he's my walking antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication. And I just can't, And the way in which I find to let out so many of those emotions that he empowers me to feel has been writing little books. And he's got one, he's like Meet Copper, which literally talks about when I was surprised with Copper and wasn't ready for him. But then every book finishes with a little lesson on the back of it. And it's about, sometimes surprises happen and they're actually what we need, not what we want. And the next one is, Copper's first trip to the beach. And it's all the books have actually literally got a picture of me. So I have this, person that like does the illustrations, and I just send him actual pictures of me with Copper and he turns them into.
Oh wow! So they're all based off real photos.
Yeah. So actually, when you buy the book, like in the back of it, it'll actually show like the actual picture of me and Copper at the beach, or the actual picture of me with Copper taking a selfie in the first book, and the very back cover, like the beach one, is about when you go to the beach, listen to your parents, swim between the flags, all that sort of good stuff. It's all about a little message, but. Yeah, it's funny how we find a creative release sometimes to help us get our emotions out in a comfortable way.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I think we've covered everything. I do have a little story for you.
I'll do it. I'm ready. I've done all the bloody talking, mate. Let's go.
So we can include this or not include it. It's up to you once we finish recording it.
No, do it.
So I do Krav Maga. So I was at Krav last night. I was at Krav last night, and one of my mate's daughters does it, and he's ex One Armored Regiment.
Okay, we might in the whole against him.
Yep, exactly. So like, because I told him about it. I said, dude, man, I've got this guy coming on, and I'm so excited. Like I've been following him for years, and I'm a bit nervous. And he goes, oh, who you got coming on? And he's like, oh, I said, I got Heston. And he's like, oh, I know that name. And I pulled out the photos that you sent me. He goes, holy fuck. And I'm like, what? He goes, and he's looking at the photo, the few photos that he sent me. He goes, that's should be illegal. And I said, what should be illegal? He goes, for him to be that good looking and done everything is done, that should be fucking illegal. And I said, I'm going to put that in the podcast.
Oh, mate. Isn't it, mate? Look, I have a personality too. Do you know what's funny? And I'm not saying this to diminish myself in any way, shape or form. I particularly only started to appreciate like even my looks and physique this last year. Like I've never been able to look in the mirror and like the way I look. It's come from being the fat, unpopular kid at school. It really has. And all this time I've looked for others to accept me. And so many people have always said things like that to me, and I've just never felt it. And I think, we're all our own worst enemies. We're all perfectionists. I think it actually will always keep me humble and grounded. But, it's just so fascinating how beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And all that I know is that we have to become our number one fan at some stage. And it's so beautiful to have stories like that. And I appreciate you having the confidence to tell me that story as well, because it does. It's that community, whether we've connected with them or not, that helps us sometimes just feel more valued. And that there's one thing I find we don't do enough in Australian society is give compliments. Like this tall poppy cutting syndrome, whatever it is, we are so negative in this country. That's why I love, and I've, even during my court case, I want to go and move back to the US. Like, you could have the most ridiculous idea, but people will be like, hey, give it a go and we're here to support you. You have any idea in this country, or I found, if I put my head up, there are people just waiting to cut you down. And it's usually the people who have never met you, who think they know you through a headline or social media. But every person who actually connects with you is actually there wanting to support you, or instead they're looking, comparing themselves competitively to you. So, give more compliments. I love that. Thank you.
Give more compliments, but I find what we're also bad is accepting the compliment. So sometimes, you give a compliment, they're like, no, it's all good. We need to learn to go, no, thank you. It's taken a lot of confidence for that person to be able to give you that compliment. We need to be better at receiving it as well.
The 5 love languages. So there's this book called The 5 Love Languages, and I made the officers, when I ran selection, go and read it after they pass selection. And you replace the word love with the word value or motivation, and skip over all the preachy bits in the book. But there are 5 love languages: physical touch, acts of service, giving and receiving gifts, words of affirmation, and quality time. And break those down. They're how we show and receive love. And some people have, one's more than other. My love language, the way I show love, is acts of service, and the way I receive love is actually through quality time and words of affirmation, particularly having spent the last 3 years having my identity pulled apart by very negative things and people jumping on board and kicking me when I'm down. So you're right. Appreciate that, hey, some people like to show love through words of affirmation. You need to then receive that and accept that, because you're actually helping them feel motivated, feel loved, feel valued, because that's the way they show love. And it's, that's why I say I'm terrible at receiving compliments, as you've just seen, but it's actually realizing, accept it in order to help them show and feel love and be appreciative that they've gone to those levels, because like we said beforehand, most people in Australia don't, in my opinion.
Yep. There you go. Well, Fabio, if you're listening,
I'll my best to your drama. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know what was going to happen there. I didn't know where.
Yeah, I saw your face sitting there. I was like, oh.
I'm like meeting me up in a club somewhere or something.
No. So Fabio, if you're listening, I did it, mate. You're all good.
Thank you, mate. I really appreciate that. Thanks for taking the time and energy to do that.
Well, Heston, mate, I think that about wraps everything up. I really, really appreciate you coming on. Like I said, I was a bit nervous, having you on the podcast, but I really appreciate you coming on and authentically telling these stories. I think it's very important for all veterans, first responders, and also anyone in general to be able to share their stories authentically, to share what these roles are actually like, so people that are looking into getting into these roles can actually have an idea of what they're actually like. Because what you see on the movies, what you see on TV is not an accurate representation of what these roles are.
100%. And I call these my mental fitness moments. Like I said to you, thank you for having me on and having these chats and allowing me to be authentic and to ramble as well, because it makes me feel more motivated and more connected as a person as well.
No worries, mate. Well, thank you very much, and hopefully, who knows, in a few years we'll have you on again and get a bit of a life update.
Job's on. We'll see what happens, eh? Oh God.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you for tuning into the Priority Zero podcast. We greatly appreciate your dedicated listenership. If you are interested in being featured as a guest on our show, we welcome you to reach out to us through our official channels on Facebook or Instagram. Alternatively, you can contact us via email at contact@priorityzero.com.au. We value your support in helping us spread these compelling stories to a wider audience. Kindly consider liking and sharing these episodes, as it plays a crucial role in our mission to reach as many people as possible.